Hey friends, so sorry about that. A little technical difficulty, but we have made it back. You have been looking at a live satellite and radar loop of Hurricane Helene. We have been talking about this storm for days now. And if you remember earlier this week, it was just becoming a named storm, and now it is forecast to become a major hurricane at landfall a little bit later today in the Big Bend of Florida. So we have a lot of widespread impacts. We always talk about how you do not want to focus on the cone, and boy, do we mean it with this storm. The inland impacts, things that are happening to the east of the storm. A lot of folks, I will say, most Americans that live across the southeastern U.S. going to be feeling some sort of impact from this. So I actually want to take you out to our latest advisory. We just got an update and a brand new track as of 10 o'clock this morning. So an hour ago, again, we are in Central Time here in Houston, and Helene is strengthening. We're looking at 105 mile per hour maximum sustained winds, and the movement has picked up a little bit. North-northeast at about 14 miles per hour. Last advisory was actually about 12, 13 miles per hour. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but the thing is, we're seeing those impacts across the entire state of Florida right now. But here we go. Later this afternoon is likely when we are going to be seeing this storm officially reach major hurricane strength, and just before it makes landfall along the Big Bend of Florida. And I want you to see that line. Again, we don't like to talk about the center line, but it's where we could see the center of circulation. And Tallahassee is right within the middle of that. And this would be the strongest storm that they have ever received a direct impact from. Now, if you live there, there's been some storms that have gone just to the east, if not just to the west. And you know, if a storm's coming to the west of you, you're going to be getting a lot of the impacts. But, you know, folks there are taking the proper precautions, and we'll actually have a live interview with one of our Fox News reporters who is in Tallahassee right now with more details on that. But I want to take you up into Georgia, and let me just go back one graphic real quick for you guys. As we continue through this, you can see that the storm is going to be moving directly north, moving into Georgia. So the inland impacts in Georgia are going to be very high. I mean, it's likely still going to be a Category 1 storm through the center of the state of Georgia. And then it's not going to be until Atlanta area, you know, maybe a little bit before Atlanta, maybe a little bit after, that we see it drop to tropical storm strength. So with all of that being said, we are going to be seeing those impacts far away from where this storm makes landfall. So again, max sustained winds 105 right now. That's 5 miles per hour short of, well, really 6, of becoming a Category 3 storm. But it would have to reach 130 miles per hour for that Cat 4 strength, that it looks like it's just going to be below that. But I did mention that we are going to be talking with one of our reporters who is out in Tallahassee right now. So let's send things over to Miss Rebekah Castor, and you have been there for a little while. So tell me, kind of like set the scene. What have folks been doing leading up to this point? What are you seeing now? And is it even raining there at this moment?
Yeah, so Allison, at the risk of sounding cliche here, what we are seeing so far this morning here in Tallahassee is really the calm before the storm. We've been out here since early this morning, since 3 a.m. local time, and we've been seeing light to heavy rain on and off so far this morning, but we know that the conditions here are going to get a lot worse as we get closer to Helene making landfall tonight.
I mean, it's incredible. So how long have you been there? What time did you get there? Maybe yesterday?
Yes, so we got into town yesterday afternoon, and we did some driving around. A lot of people taking those, starting their preparations yesterday. We saw a lot of folks filling up their sandbags. That seems to be a lot of people's main concern, is the risk for flooding. Tallahassee is anticipating between 6 to 8 inches of rainfall between today through Friday. So that's a significant amount of rain. So a lot of people, especially if you're in a first level apartment, they're worried that some of those waters could get into their home homes. So we saw a lot of people filling up sandbags yesterday to prepare for that.
And then what about the grocery stores? Have you gone by? I used to live in Florida and covered several hurricanes, and the first things to go, usually the water and the toilet paper and bread.
Yeah, we did see some of that yesterday. Not too much of a crazy rush as I've seen covering other storms as well. Also, I didn't see those long lines at the gas stations either, and that is usually a big concern with people worried about keeping their generators going. Not too many people evacuating either. Of course, there's mandatory evacuations for those that live in mobile homes, but a lot of other folks are planning to ride out this storm here in Tallahassee.
And with the university there, I remember you saying in some of your earlier live shots that a lot of the students were asked, please go home and don't stay here and ride this out.
Yeah, they were strongly encouraged to leave the area if they have, folks out of town that they can go stay with for the time being. Any student that can't leave or chooses to stay, if they feel unsafe riding this out in their dorm or off-campus housing, Florida State University has opened a shelter this morning. Students are welcome to go there. They're encouraged to be there by now. They were supposed to be there by 12 o'clock local time. So hopefully they've made those decisions. And if a student is riding out the storm there, they'll have to stay in that shelter until university officials give the all clear.
And I just want to talk about Tallahassee in general, because this would be the strongest storm to hit them if everything kind of goes to plan as to what the latest models say. But I mean, because they haven't seen something of this magnitude, do you think that there's overgrown trees? Are there power lines ready for this? What are officials saying there?
Yeah, so exactly as you mentioned, the downed trees, the power outages, those are basically going to be guaranteed if we see this hit as strongly as it is forecast to right now. And if Tallahassee stays in the line, we've seen some shifting, but it still looks like Tallahassee is going to take a near direct hit from this. And a Category 3 storm has never hit Tallahassee. This will be the most powerful storm to hit this community, which is why I think we saw those people yesterday filling up those sandbags, worried about the flash flooding. Not, as I mentioned, there are not too many people leaving, though, which is interesting since this is, going to be a pretty powerful storm.
And it's so interesting because Tallahassee is right on the I-10 corridor. All you would have to do is hop on I-10 and head west and just get out of Dodge, because we're going to be seeing so many of the impacts north. And then,
and you really don't have to drive that far either to get out of the route, just 100 miles west and you'd be out of the path.
Yeah, you get a hotel room for a night or two. I mean, hopefully you guys in Tallahassee don't lose power for all too that long, but with a Category 3 storm making landfall, it does seem something that is likely. And just want to make sure that you're staying safe. You're going to be staying on at least a second floor tonight, right?
Yeah, I'm on the 4th floor in our hotel, so we should be all good there.
Good. I'm so glad. Well, thank you so much for all of your hard work. We truly appreciate everything and just hope that it's safe. You guys are safe, and then hopefully we'll be hearing from you soon so you can talk to folks to see what the impacts truly were as the system makes landfall. Bye, Rebekah. Well, great reporting there by Rebekah. She was talking to officials and, just being out and about. Like I was mentioning to her that I lived in Florida for several years. I covered 3 hurricanes that did make landfall in our viewing area. So I understand what folks are going through right now, and especially seeing just how large this storm is as a whole. I mean, you look at just like the center of where we are seeing the convection right now, and yes, that's technically offshore, but it's the outer rain bands that have already brought several tornado warnings. So I worked in Orlando, and I was actually just texting with one of the meteorologists I work with, and he's just like, it's coming, and it's different from other storms and similar. If you remember, Hurricane Idalia did make landfall around where Helene is forecast to make landfall. The thing with Idalia is that it was going through eye wall replacement, which we see with storms all the time. That's the natural progression of hurricanes. But when it's going through eye wall replacement right before it makes landfall, it's not quite as strong. The thing with this storm is there's going to be no eye wall replacement before landfall. If anything, it's going to be strengthening upon landfall. And the timing is going to be between 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And that means that folks, it's going to be dark. You can't tell what's going on. So it's so important that if, Hopefully it's not too late for maybe some of the folks where Rebekah was in Tallahassee to evacuate. I would expect I-10 is probably very busy at this time, but you know, landfall is now less than 12 hours away, so everybody needs to make sure that they have everything ready to go. And I actually want to share some footage with you from Fox Weather meteorologist Michael Estime. He was in St. Petersburg, Florida, and actually still is. And remember, I talked with Rebekah about the store shelves being cleared out? Well, that's exactly what we are seeing there. That looks like it's in the drink aisle. So water probably gone. I mentioned bread. Toilet paper is usually something that also goes pretty quickly. Yep, there's Michael with just a few smart waters that are left. Thousands of people have already been forced to evacuate, and a state of emergency is in place for nearly all of the state's counties. That's more than 32 million people under flood watches across the entire southeast coast. Now, forecasters do expect this to be the strongest storm to hit the U.S. in more than a year. But I want to take you back to some footage of what damage Helene did in Mexico, and they already saw the storm's wrath just yesterday. This is a look at some of the impacts on the coast before it even strengthened into a hurricane. Take a look at the strong winds, that rain. I mean, I saw some video of tons of cars that were just completely flooded out. This was taken from resorts in Cozumel, and residents were seeing plenty of the flooding, downed trees, and unfortunately when there's downed trees, we know that there's downed power lines. So power potentially an issue there. Haven't quite heard an update yet, but we'll continue to bring you the latest. Now I want to take you into the center of Helene. NOAA's hurricane hunters have flown into Helene numerous times already, but this specifically is a view from the cockpit in the eye of the storm from Miss Piggy. Miss Piggy is the name of this plane that hurricane hunters used based in Lakeland to fly into storms. Now, according to NOAA, each plane is equipped with instruments and devices that actually drop into the storm. They measure pressure, humidity, temperature, wind direction, wind speed, among other things. But it truly is incredible to see, wow, the plane's not moving very much. Well, it's in the eye of the storm, but it had to go through the storm to get to the eye. So you've seen video of the planes dropping just because of the quick change in pressure when you are flying through a massive tropical system like Helene. So I'm going to quickly show you a few more graphics before we're going to head to break. But we had mentioned the category of the storm, but I want to talk about those impacts because peak storm surge, where we're likely going to be seeing landfall in the Big Bend, 15 to 20 feet. But the thing is, I mentioned that it's not just the folks in the path or the cone, it's elsewhere. I mean, we're looking north, south, east, west, anywhere around the storm. We are seeing tropical storm force winds extending more than 250 miles outside the center of the storm, meaning it's over the state of Florida right now, specifically the Florida Peninsula, including Miami, Tampa, and even a bit of the Orlando area. And then that's going to continue inland once landfall happens later today. So folks in southern Georgia, right on the Florida-Georgia line there, need to be taking the proper precautions because with those strong winds also comes the heavy rain, and we are going to see it extending from coastal Florida to Georgia, Alabama, the Carolinas. We'll see it up in Virginia, even Kentucky and Tennessee over the next few days. So you guys, still a lot to go with this storm, but we're going to be here with you, bringing you the latest updates. Remember, you can depend on us here at Fox 26, but we'll have more coming up after the break. Everyone, hope you're having a good day. We appreciate you joining us here on Forecasting with Friends. Now, our chief meteorologist, Mike Iskovitz, actually has gone into detail and done some research on why we haven't seen many Atlantic hurricanes this year, even though there have been so many in the Gulf of Mexico. Let's hear what he found out.
Obviously, our main concern for today is what's going on in the Gulf of Mexico with Helene, but I wanted to talk more generally about what in the world's been happening this season and the reason why it's been, at least up until now, much different than we expected. Remember, at the beginning of the season, predictions were that we could see 20, 23, maybe 25 named storms for this year. Now, we still have a ways to go, But for right now, it has still been unexpectedly quiet. Now, during the month of September, these are the primary areas that we typically see development. This is what's called the main development region out here in the Atlantic Ocean in the so-called Cape Verde season, where we get those big storms that form out here, and they either rumble through the Caribbean or they curve before they hit the east coast of the United States. So that's what we usually see. But there have been some changes this year that I have come across that are really, really interesting. And this is from an article that caught my attention from livescience.com. And it's something that a lot of forecasters, particularly in Europe, took note of. So I want to talk about this part of the world where we see the tropical systems or the tropical waves originate. And we're talking about the west coast of Africa. And this area, this shows us moisture levels. And so you have the really dark green colors indicating areas where we have heavy rain, and it's like rainforest kind of conditions. And so that's from Central Africa here, the southern portions of Nigeria, the Ivory Coast, Ghana, and then heading over here to around Senegal. And then those tropical waves move off the west coast of Africa. Now, things have been a little bit different this year. Typically, you have this narrow area, which we call the ITCZ, or Intertropical Convergence Zone. And that's the source region of a lot of our Cape Verde season, which would be like late August, September variety of storms. So this area, the ITCZ, is where you have almost constant, like daily downpours. And then on the other side of that, up here, well, you may know what that is, the Sahara Desert. So that's an area that receives very little rainfall each year. Some places only maybe 3 or 4 inches of rain each year, while you might get 50, 60, or 70 inches of rain in a lot of the spots there in the ITCZ. Well, what appears to be happening this year, and we don't know yet if this is exactly what's causing the changes in hurricane season, but it's a suspect. And it has to do with where this dashed line is that's referred to as the Intertropical Front, or the ITF. Now, this separates the really humid air that's close to the Atlantic Ocean from the desert air. And there's a big, big difference, right? So, I mean, picture sand dunes and just desolate land here in parts of Algeria, Libya, northern parts of Niger, and then areas off toward the south that are just lush and almost constant rain during the rainy season. Well, that dividing line is called the Intertropical Front, or the ITF. It's similar in some ways to what we have in West Texas, our West Texas dry line, which separates the humid Gulf air from the West Texas desert air. It's a similar kind of concept. But what's happened this year is that that has moved farther to the north by about 2 degrees, just a little bit. But that northward movement has brought heavy rain actually to parts of the Sahara Desert, and it looks like it may have changed the location of tropical waves a little bit. So while most tropical waves move off the coastline, let's say down here, and pass to the south of the Cape Verde Islands, it seems that this year possibly they've been shifted to the north just a little. And that may be the explanation for why they have not been developing as briskly as they usually would. So we do have some tropical waves out there. I mean, there's one there in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean that we'll be watching for you. But really, it's this phenomenon here of this ITF, this dividing line between rainy and dry, that has really set things up to be a little bit different this year. And amazingly, what happens over there, even in the Sahara Desert, can have wide-ranging effects all the way across to Texas and to the rest of the USA. Allison.
Thank you so much, Mike. And, you know, I think that's been a big question because we've seen so many landfalling storms right here along the Gulf Coast, but it's been pretty quiet, crickets out across the Atlantic. So we appreciate you, Mike. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, I do want to talk about a new partnership that's bringing another purpose to NFL stadiums across the country. And I think this is such a great idea that the NFL is partnering with FEMA to designate several locations as emergency shelters. Stadiums belonging to teams like the Jets, Giants, Rams, Seahawks, and Buccaneers are under review for designation. They will be used for response and recovery activities during a declared emergency or disaster. And I was talking about this with our anchor Denise this morning, and she's like, well, I wonder about Buccaneers, where they play. in Tampa, but the thing is that's an open air stadium. So for something like this where there's weather going on, probably not good for the ones that don't have a roof. But hey, ones that have a roof would be a great idea. Probably some baseball stadiums that could be good for that as well. So something that we'll watch and continue to see if that does pan out, at least for this system in particular. Well, you guys will have more details on your full forecast here in Houston. I think you're going to like what the next few mornings have to offer. Welcome back, everyone. I didn't get to a graphic that I really wanted to show you about the wind field of Helene right now. So in these areas that we're seeing shaded in red, that's going to be the hurricane force wind field, meaning winds upwards of 75 miles per hour. But it's everything that's shaded in yellow that is tropical storm force. And we're seeing it across basically the southern half of the peninsula of Florida. Come this afternoon, 3, 4, 5 o'clock, it's going to be taking up the entirety of the state. So if you have family or friends there, yes, you're feeling some of the rain and winds now, but that's even going to get more intense as Helene intensifies and likely makes landfall as that Category 3 storm. But the wind field's going to continue into Georgia, South Carolina as we head into the early morning hours tomorrow. So do not let your guard down, as we are still going to see the impacts continue far and wide across the southeastern U.S. in the days to come. But here we go. It's 11. So joyfully say that we are in the low 80s. Guys, usually at this time we're knocking on the door of 90, but no, today we're likely not even going to reach the 90s. Upper 80s is where we're peaking in Pasadena this afternoon. Sugar Land likely just shy of 90, but hey, we'll take 80s. All that we can get. But I want to talk about not only the forecast highs today in the widespread mid 80s along the coast, but it's the wake up temperatures tomorrow that I think you're going to like. Yes, widespread 60s. Oh, it's going to be feeling like fall. Pleasant for the few days, at least through the weekend. Wake up temperatures remain in the 60s before humidity comes back by next week. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us.